Hi, I'm Paul Moore Jr., COO of CitiHope International, and this is my CitiHope story. Now, my story actually begins on the very first night that our organization's name was used. Now, did you know that before we were International Humanitarian Relief and Development Agency, that CitiHope International was actually a radio program? That's right, CitiHope Radio Ministry. On an autumn night, it was crisp out. My father and mother and myself jumped into our beaten-up blue station wagon, I think it was a Volvo, and we drove out to Hackensack, New Jersey, to the offices of WWDJ 970 on the AM dial for our very first radio broadcast. You know, I used to love going there, not just because of the ministry and how exciting it was to be on air, but because they had an old school vintage Coca-Cola machine with the old glass bottles, and it was only a quarter a Coke, and I used to just bring obscene amounts of quarters with me. But more to the point, I'll never forget that very first night and listening to the passion and the conviction in the voice of my mother and father as they described their vision for our radio program. You see, years after working in inner city ministry, they realized that there were thousands of churches, organizations, and even private individuals who could make an even larger difference for the people in the lives of the people that they served if they just had a better access to the resources that they needed. But there was no connection between those who had those resources and these ministries that were already doing the good work of not only giving people handouts, but really helping them out of their circumstances, giving them new life. And so my father decided that there was going to be a ministry, CitiHope Radio, that was going to connect those people who had those resources with those people who were helping those in need. He called it the Compassionate Connection. One of my favorite stories was one of those ministries that we were supporting joined my mother as she went down into the sub-levels of Grand Central Station. Most people don't know that back in the 80s there were actually colonies of homeless families that lived deep under that grand old building. And from that group of families, a young mom expecting a child in just a few short months and her husband decided they wanted to change their life. And through that ministry we were sponsoring and my mom, they came up to our radio studio, which at that time ended up being in Manhattan, and put them on the air to describe that process. Now, they had already been given through this ministry a home to live in, but the baby was coming soon. And in the midst of the radio broadcast, my father asked her a simple question. Have you had a baby shower? And she wasn't real certain what that was. And first she said, well, you know, they didn't have any showers underneath Grand Central, and so it's been difficult. And he said, no, sweetheart, no, not at all. My mom grabbed her hand and pulled her in close. She said, no, a baby shower, a party celebrating the birth of your future child. And she kind of sheepishly looked at him and said, no, I haven't. So my dad right there on the spot decided to have one on the air. And immediately we started getting phone calls from people who had little this and little bits of that. But my favorite call was from a woman who had been expecting a child. They weren't sure, the mother and father, if it was going to be a boy or a girl. But unfortunately, through a miscarriage, which she shared that personal moment with us on air, had lost her baby. But she had everything: a crib, diapers, changing table, linens, baby clothes, everything. And she wanted to donate it to this other mom. And instantly, wouldn't you know, this homeless mom started ministering to her and saying how sad she was at her loss and how grateful that her child would be the recipient of those things that she intended for the baby that was lost. We had the wonderful gift, but we had no way to get it there. So once again, Reverend Moore started asking, we need to have a way to get this incredible donation to see this story completed. And sure enough, a few minutes later, guy calling off of the New Jersey Turnpike had a straight job. He calls in, he says, hey, Reverend Moore, you know, you got me in tears over here. I had to pull over. I'm crying down here, but hey, I got a straight job with me right now. It's empty. I'll be glad to bring this stuff over to her, but I need someone to help me load it and pick it up. A few moments later, someone calls from a local church, and it's a men's night meeting, and they say, not only will we be there and we'll show up to help load up this truck, but we'll drive all the way over to Queens where this ministry has her, and we'll unload the truck for her and make sure everything's set up. That was the Compassionate Connection. something that would end up serving us very well in our years ahead in international humanitarian relief, where we found doctors who could make a difference, life or death difference, in the lives of the children that they were serving if they only had the medicine that they needed to be able to do it. We've lived off of that principle of knowing that there are those people who have and who want to help if they just had a connection to those who are doing the great work of ministry. And it's been our joy these 25 years, 29 years since that first radio broadcast, of being the compassionate connection and making a world of difference for good. Thank you so much for doing it with us, and may God bless you.